Chapter 3 Forlorn Hope. Stitch by stitch, stitching it together. Deadline looms. What is it like to desire freedom? If I were asked what it was like to be free, the answer would be simple. I don't know. But a desire, a driving instinct to seek to take for myself the freedom denied me my entire life, what would that feel like? I'm not sure. Even as I drew my dreams upon the walls of Whiplash's storage cupboard, there was a niggling doubt in the back of my mind. That part of me, still chained to the ground and held to the whims of Master Red-Eye, would let doubt trickle into my thoughts even as I made my decision. I didn't know what it was that gave me the will to fight it off. Perhaps something in my Pegasus blood about wanting freedom? I couldn't imagine it. How could I want what I could never truly achieve in the sky? But there was going to be no turning back. I had beaten the slave in my mind. I knew what I wanted now. I was going to escape. I had thought that might make my mind shut up, to let my subconscious finally die off and give me a break from the torturous duality that had become my own thoughts these past 2 days. But no, it didn't slink away and cower as I smiled, drew and wished for a better life at last. It just lurked in my mind, feeding doubt and questions to try and unsettle the new parts of me that wanted out. But it would not win. I wouldn't let it. After all, I had another reason now, a very basic and utterly driven one. I needed to escape to live. Before the pit, I had been perfectly willing to slave away until I eventually keeled over and simply expired, to be nothing more than a statistic of caps for Red-Eye to replace in short order. But I had been shown the value of life, and to what extent it should be fought for. My sickness claws at my lungs and blood, irradiated, mutating, and aggressive. The disease is accelerating at a rate that, had I not taken action at the slave market, would probably have killed me in my sleep within hours. Even as I lay in the dark, surrounded by visions of a happier future and the drawings of those that mattered, I could feel it in my lungs, burning, strained, and only growing. My coughing was under control for now, but my mouth still had the sharp metallic taste of blood at the back of my throat. Instead of trying to make me stay, the born slave in my mind merely sought to make me question. Did I really desire freedom as I thought I did? Or did I just want out to continue living out of fear? The fear that I would die soon? Look, I am not a brave pony. I cry, whine, squeak, and when threatened, more often beg for mercy than resist. Was this the right thing for such a weak pony as me? What if I got out and found a world I could not survive? I'm a Pegasus. What would happen when I no longer had slavers to protect me from others? Is my desire for freedom truly wishing for me to become threatened by a world that required decisiveness and strength? Could I even think for myself after goddesses? I didn't even know how old I was to know how long I had simply been taking orders. Even when I set out to do something for myself yesterday, I was still just following orders the entire time. I just didn't know. I didn't know how to be free. There were other things, though. I had always known a certain range of permitted boundaries, whether it be the walls of an enclosure, the length of the chain that held me, or an assurance that if I moved over a line, I would be shot immediately. Something had always stood that told me where my world ended. What would I even do in a world with no limits but my own choice? But that world was now calling to me. I could not deny it any more than I had obeyed the beck and call of every master from here to Shattered Hoof in Manhattan. I didn't care if it was a desire for freedom or a desire to simply live. That voice in my head would shut up. I would overcome it. I had to. To escape was to live. Perhaps I just wanted both. I won't say I wasn't afraid. Indeed, I was terrified. Perhaps that fear is what propelled me to actually take these steps? To wish for a better tomorrow, where I might live for longer than a few days. A few days. The same time it took me to realize why I needed to live is now what I have left. I can't fail. It's do or die. No time to falter. I had to dare. Dare to dream. The colossal length of piping crashed down behind me. Scrambling back to my hooves, I began coughing as the dust and dirt flew up in my face from the shockwave. My dive to dodge it had only just carried me out of its path, but the weight striking the ground had still shaken me to the core. Spluttering and fighting the urge to continue coughing, I would not let it win. Not now. I began untangling my harness from the pipe I had pulled free. Slaves began to move in with auto axes, whirring ready to cut the pipe into smaller chunks for transport to the steel mills. Whiplash had come to fetch me in the early morning, thankfully not noticing my drawings on his wall, to bring me out for the first of my multiple daily shifts. In this case, helping dismantle a section of the roller coaster wrecked by the stable dwellers' escape. Surrounding me in the cordoned-off section of the fun farm was a whole bustle of activities. Ponies pulled the roller coaster's struts apart with ropes tied to harnesses, while others clambered over the coaster itself to tear down the metal from all the damaged sections. Old dust and dirt beneath the coaster was kicked up from so many hooves galloping back and forth, or small craters from the explosives used trying to catch that elusive mare 2 days ago. It was dangerous work, requiring ponies to pull free huge lengths of scaffolding after they had been bent out of position, and then pray it didn't land on them. Somehow, I had been allotted to that job, despite my weak physicality. The irony of being in danger from the aftermath of her escape was not lost on me. Like every other role I had gone through in my time in Philadelphia, it was backbreaking, lethal, and exhausting. Already I had witnessed 6 slaves carted off to some place for failing to meet quotas. 3 others had been crushed by the pipes. One's scream wouldn't leave me any time soon. They hadn't died immediately. More than ever I was taking care, however. My makeshift vest had nothing near the same reliability as my now sadly lost jerkin for keeping my wings hidden. Many times I'd had to risk being lashed by pausing to ensure it stayed in place. I guess I was just lucky that no slaves from the terminal enclosure had been sent here. Already, rumors had spread. I heard them as I worked. "Did you hear? Red Eye got himself a Pegasus slave." "I hear we're getting an execution of a Pegasus soldier in a week. They say some Pegasus killed 3 slaves already, pushed them into a vat of molten metal." Just like every encampment before, hearsay and gossip traveled like wildfire among slaves who had little news or input from any source other than rumor and stories from other slaves. Even as I picked myself up and trotted to find the next pipe on weary legs, I could hear the buzzword around me. But let them. I wouldn't be around here much longer to be affected by what they had to say about Pegasi. Perhaps they were all evil and killed foals up in their cloud fortresses. I just didn't care. I had never been a Pegasus in any sense of the word. I had more in common with my fellow slaves than I would to any so-called Pegasus enclave. Indeed, none of it mattered, not even the work. For the first time in years, I didn't mind the dreary toil I was expected to do, for now I knew these were the last shifts I would ever work. I think I even let a smile creep across my face in the downtimes between tasks, just imagining everything that was waiting for me. In my wildest dreams, I imagined escaping past the wall, finding a small settlement and encountering a lovely doctor. A mare. That's right, a lovely mare doctor who would heal my wounds, cure my disease, and maybe have some directions to Shattered Hoof. There, I would find my mother, and we'd both escape and go off to live in 10 Pony Tower. Somehow. Safe forever. Maybe I'd even meet the stable dweller there. DJ Palm3 talked of her enough to imply that she occasionally visited. I'd like to say thank you, shake her hoof, maybe even give her a hug. I could offer her a home with me and my mother. Good ponies all. And there was so much the two of us could do. Save the slaves in Philly. Explore the wastes. We could travel together. Get to know one another more. Get closer and my imagination was getting a little too carried away. I lightly thumped my hoof to my face and shook my head. Crazy dreams were great and all, but now was the time for planning. I had less than 24 hours to sort everything out, find my route, and go for it.
Hey, that damn pipe's still attached up there.
My reverie broken, I turned my head to look at the slaves behind me. They were trying to attach the ropes from my harness onto the next scaffolding pipe of the roller coaster's broken track section. The filthy slaves were using grapple harnesses to pull themselves up to separate the pipe from the track. I was a bit envious. A grapple harness was a bit like a battle saddle, really. I kinda wanted one still, but none of the ones they had would fit me, so I was left grounded, as always. While even earth ponies got to fire hooks and tow themselves off the ground. Pegasi got to fly. Unicorns powerful enough could self-levitate. Earth ponies got gadgets. When would it be my turn? But no helpful things for a little pony with no unique features at all, bar hearing that made it hard to sleep at night, and mental conditioning to obey whatever he was told. I sighed, lowering my head to stop looking at them as they started sawing into the pipe with mouth-held hacksaws. At least I'd get a brief break while they took care of it. Immediately, 2 ideas came to mind. I could look around the roller coaster area for anything handy to escape with, or I could use my time to work in my journal. The former was perhaps the most practical one. But looking around me at the dusty work area filled with teams of ponies tugging on larger scaffolding, slavers barking orders and whipping the slow ones, or the danger of constantly tumbling scrap from the auto-axe wheelers up high, made me reconsider. Sure, I might find something, but I was still trying to plan my work. Randomly searching would only lead to a beasting from a slaver if I was late back here. No. I'd need to take risks to get supplies soon enough. Don't gamble it all on an area with little worthwhile loot. Besides, I was in a quieter section nearer the Fun Farm barn, and I got the pleasure of watching a gigantic pink pony statue being torn apart. One more face to not always seem to be staring at me. That was worth something, right? When I got out of here, I'd never need to see her laughing face ever again. I lay down as the slaves behind me got to work setting up to pull the next pipe down. They wouldn't disturb me. No one disturbed me today. Word had gotten around that I was property of the master now. Apparently, you did not disturb his prize if you planned on living another day in Philadelphia. The mere thought gave way to trembling as I pulled the journal from my acquired saddlebag. Dropping it, I curled up around it as I tried to fight the terror that he gave to my mind. By some distance, the most vile, horrifying, intimidating pony I had ever met, his cutie mark seemed burned into my mind almost as much as the imagery of watching the stable dweller rising into the air, the eternal chain, a symbol of slavery. I feared that he would show up right at the last moment to prevent my escape by destiny itself, observing his right to own me, born slaver to born slave. No, I couldn't let the fear overtake me. He was just a pony, a big, scary one, but a pony all the same. I'd met a stronger pony. I was sure number 6 could have flattened the master, but he wasn't around. The fear wouldn't go away. I could reduce it, but in the few minutes I had met him, the master had left a mark. I wondered if 10 years down the line, in my dream castle of living in Ten Pony Tower, I would still be afraid of him turning up to reclaim me. The nightmare of waking up in the middle of the night to find his rotten grimace smiling at me as the chains locked home, of him dragging me away with no pony, not even the stable dweller hearing my cries. I couldn't even bring myself to open the journal. I was afraid I'd just end up drawing him and being stuck with his image forever. I felt my eyes beginning to water. I knew I was going to try. Nothing was changing that now. But I was so afraid. "Heads up!" My eyes sprung open to look upwards before screaming as I saw a shard of scrap falling from above. A panicked-looking mare with an auto-axe glancing down in horror. Slaves scattered. I tried to follow, but my harness was still tied to the roller coaster pipe. I screamed for some pony to help, trying to unfasten it as the massive object hurtled vertically towards me. I was pretty dexterous with my mouth and hooves. I had to be, really, but the buckle was jamming on the rusting parts and frayed cloth. A weight crashed into me, but not from above, from the side, pulling me sharply to the side hard enough to cause me to squeal in pain. I felt my body stretch against the harness, before the deafening sound of the scrap hitting the ground knocked out my senses entirely, amidst a miniature storm of dust kicked up by the impact. A sudden pressure was released as I catapulted backwards away from the scrap, barreling into some pony else, to land in a heap on the floor. Gradually, the noise of metal fragments landing and screaming slaves died down. My own voice, probably last of all. I could feel some pony holding on to me, before quickly releasing the pair of us scrambling up. "I really hope pulling you out from under things isn't going to become a habit." My heart almost skipped a beat as I whirled, ignoring the bodily pains as I saw creamy yellow coat, light orange mane tinged with red. It was her! The mare from outside Slit's factory 2 days ago. She stood up, shivering with adrenaline from the death-defying dive she had used to save my life. I just stood gaping. Never had I ever expected to see her again. Such a random happenstance before, becoming a second chance. I had been too nervous, shy, and brutalized last time to really respond to her or show proper gratitude. I had to make up for that. You? Smooth, Murky. Smooth. She tilted her head, as though confused, but grinned anyway, reaching out to steady me on my hooves with a front leg. Without a word, she simply led me to the side, encouraging me to lie on my side upon a dust mound. Feeling the adrenaline pass, the shock overcame me enough to half lie and half collapse down. Only now I noticed my harness had been cut by the shard that fell, the razor edge severing me from the pipe as easily as it would have cut me in two. "Whoa, careful there," she whispered, catching my head in her hooves. "Just take it easy, okay? Geez, you look even worse than when I last saw you. You sure you're all right?" "No, I'm dying of an irradiated lung infection and ever-growing rad poisoning, thanks to Philadelphia." "Yeah," I muttered, rasping a little on the dust thrown up from the impact. I just need to get my breath. Thank you. I mean, really, thank you. For both times." "Well, I couldn't just stand by and let you get crushed." She sat down beside me, a couple feet away. "Seriously, you look terrible. Those rad sores. You've not had a very good time. Most of those cuts look barely healed. Say, what's your name? Sorry, I never asked last time." I was about to simply say it, but part of me stopped short of saying my full name. I really didn't want to explain it to her, mostly because I tended to cry whenever I thought about it. "Murky." "Well, Murk," she said, oddly brightly. "Glad to see you again. It's a rare day in Philly you meet someone who isn't out to abuse you somehow. Pity we don't seem to share shifts more." She glanced out at the other slaves, most of them being directed to harness up to the shard, and drag it away to continue work on the scaffolding around the roller coaster. Apparently, the whip-happy guards were too busy and occupied to notice us on the other side of our dust mound. Nearby to us, one of the odd little sprite bots buzzed around. This close to the Fun Farm's big barn, they were fairly common. Honestly, I hadn't a clue what they were, other than sources of irritating music. This one was a little different, showing an old cracked video screen as it glanced at us for a second, before buzzing away silently. "That said," she continued, "I wouldn't wish anyone to be around the Fun Farm. This place has some nasty ponies, even by Philly's standards." I'm from the Fun Farm," I said quickly, coughing for a few seconds. "I'm held up in the petting zoo, near the entrance. Whiplash's stock." "Oh, no, Murk, don't say that." "Say what?" "Stock. You aren't just some stock, Murk. You're a pony, a thinking being. You aren't just some number." If only I even knew which number I was. "But you're from the petting zoo? I'm from the bumper plow pit." If only we'd known we were so close, you know? I could have done with some pony to talk to. What? This entire time she'd been less than 200 meters away? Hearing her say that, and talking to me as a person, not just a slave, I wasn't entirely sure what to respond with. Social interaction wasn't really a skill of mine. I was conditioned to be led. Well, I guess I could let her lead the conversation, right? "So, drawn anything else lately?" I have to admit, I couldn't stop thinking about that. I even tried my own, you know? But I'm no artist. "Can I see again, please?" That I could do. My silence in the conversation felt awkward, but I couldn't imagine she'd be too interested in anything I had to say anyway. I was just that kind of pony. Handing over my journal, I realized it was still clutched under one hoof from the escape. Taking it with her magic, the mare began looking through more of it again. I blushed as I saw her grin going past. Well, those pictures again. She looked at the ones of number 6, whistling at the sheer size of him beside a 2-scale version of myself. I sat in silence, trying to calm my rampant hoarse coughing every few seconds. Something about some pony else looking at my drawings just helped them feel justified. Is that what ponies who draw are supposed to do? Show others? Wait. She pointed a hoof down as she looked at one of my more recent drawings. This is you, right? I nodded slowly. Why do you have wings in this? My heart skipped a beat. Gasping, I glanced from side to side fearfully. No other slaves were paying us any heed. The slavers were still sorting them out. I didn't need to speak. "Shh," she whispered, her eyes trained on my vest. I think I get it. Not a word more, okay?" I couldn't believe it. That was it? A pony who didn't care what I was? Did she just see the pony in front of her? The poor slave? No bias, no bigotry? I knew I should have felt happy or liberated, but frankly, the concept was so alien that I couldn't even bring up the courage to speak about it. But as she continued to turn pages and came to my ones of the stable dweller, I couldn't keep quiet. I was so proud of them, so happy to know I could draw for myself. That one's the stable dweller. The... who? Oh, that mare from the pit? Oh, wasn't she incredible, Murk? Wow, it's really nice to see her again in this. Yes, she is something. I wouldn't be alive without her. Why is that? She looked up, suddenly serious. I was number 5. The mare just seemed to take a breath, before moving forward quickly. I recoiled, startled. Could you blame me? Every pony who moved towards me yesterday had wanted to hurt me. Sensing she had scared me, the mare sat back, waving a hoof. Sorry, She seemed to search for words. flicking her long mane behind an ear with a hoof. "It's horrible to be sent there. I'm glad you got out." "Me too." "Think she'll come back for the rest of us?" "Huh?" "The stable dweller." I don't know. I can't wait anyway." "Wait." "Oh boy." I'd let something slip. I mentally bucked myself hard in the head. I couldn't afford to mess up like this. But it was her. How could I lie? "I'm going to try and escape like her. I need to." She was silent. Her eyes stared as though trying to discern if I was serious. "I wish I could too." My head sprang upwards, eyes wide. She wanted out too? I wasn't alone? "I need to get out of here. I can't live forever in some slave pit. Hell, I can't live a year in here. I'm sure you feel the same, Murk. But I just don't know how." My heart felt aflame, a kindred spirit to escape. I dragged myself up, looking around. "Come with me." What was I saying? "We can go together. 2 ponies are better than 1, right? I'm going tonight. I have a plan and everything. Kinda." I barely knew her, but she was nice. She was being nice to me, and a friendly face could be useful out there. "No, I'm sorry. Murk, I can't." My rising hope fell like the scrap from the roller coaster. I felt my legs buckle under me. "Oh." "Sorry, Murk, but please, it's not you. I have to wait for someone. She paused. "My buck. My lover. We were brought in at the same time and, well, just found comfort in one another. Such a strong spirit. He always wanted to plan to escape, you know? I think you'd like him. But he was taken to the pit. The same one as you. I convinced my slave master to allow him to come back to me if he survived. You see, instead of going to the place he originally worked at, I did a job for my master. Stole something from Wicked's factory the day I met you. But he hasn't come back yet. I didn't see him in the pit, so I can only guess it's all been held up by the confusion after the stable dweller and the riots, so I'm sorry, Murk, but I need to wait for him. We promised one another we'd escape. Together. Or not at all." She was crying. Not much, but I could see the sparkles around the edges of her eyes. I felt the urge to do something, but I didn't know quite what, as though I just didn't understand how to react or help her. "I won't abandon him, Murk, even if it means having to turn down your offer. If you could wait for us." "I can't," I interjected softly, struggling not to cry myself at her tragic tale of 2 lovers separated by slavery. It needs to be tonight for me." "The master." Something about the way I said those words led her to know exactly who I meant. Fear crossed her eyes before she nodded slowly, wiping tears with a muddy hoof. "I understand. Then good luck, Murk. Don't tell me your plan. Keep it secret. Go with the goddesses, and if you do get out, draw a little picture of me, will you? We often will meet people only briefly, know so little about them, and never know the truth. Fleeting glimpses and random luck to bring 2 ponies together, never to meet again. Some things are never explained, like why I saw you dragged under those ponies and knew it would be good to rescue you. Perhaps good attracts good in the horrible wasteland we have to live in during these dark days. I don't doubt I'll never see you again after tonight, Murk. Just remember the Mary you met, to show that even in the darkest of places, ponies can be nice to one another. Okay? That is all we need to take away to know that Equestria isn't dead yet." I presumed she had missed that I had already drawn her. Multiple times. Or was that on the parchment? I couldn't remember. My eyes were wet. Her words were just beautiful. The idea that you might at any time meet wonderful people, even if only for a few moments of bliss and relief from pain. Her eyes were dripping tears still, leading the mare to wipe them again and go back to looking at the images, smiling sadly as she saw pictures of ponies, myself and the mares I had once drawn in rather interesting ways. "I'll do that," I whispered, completely failing to keep my own tears away. "I'll remember you." "Thank you, Murk."
Hey! You two slackers!
The foul voice rang out, making both of us jump in shock. I turned and looked over at the workplace, seeing a thin but muscular earth pony mare stomping over.
Slaves don't get breaks! Get back to work!
The mare hopped up. "He's hurt, Nightfall. I was just—"
Shut up! Back to work!
"Please, he—"
Crack!
The mare recoiled as the whip lashed across her side, yelping.
I said crack! Back to work!
2 other slaver cronies galloped forward as the mare fell back, aiming to drag her forward. I don't know what drove me. I knew I should have snuck off and gotten back to work, but before I even knew what I was doing, I felt myself charging forward in front of her, taking the 3rd lash to my own brow to protect her. The 2 thugs backed off in surprise.
"Leave her alone!"
I could see the stunned look on the slavers' faces, probably not as much as mine, as I realized where I was standing and what I'd just done. The pain from my head stung badly.
"Get out of the way, Murk. The master has plans for you. I wouldn't want to affect his prize."
I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know why I'd run forward. The slavers grabbed me with their magic. I felt the telekinesis working together to yank me away from the mare, my legs pulling from under me as they began roughly yanking me to the dirt, dragging me toward another work area to separate us. I struggled, kicking and wreathing, my hoof trying to land any sort of blow. "Don't fight them! Murk!" I glanced up, seeing her standing there crying as she waved a hoof softly before turning away. "Don't fight them, please. I'll be fine. You go do what you need to." Noting my lack of resistance, I was pulled at a frightening speed away, feeling the ground rub against me enough to sting as I fought to hold my vest around me. I tried to find my voice, to fight the dryness of my throat. I needed to. "What's your name?" I screamed as loud as I could, but over the screaming auto axes and crashes of falling scrap, I couldn't hear if she replied, even with my tainted hearing. The last I saw her, she was being shoved towards her workplace again. The slavery would not end, even for one so nice. I cried openly as the dust swirled around us again, making me choke up. I would remember. I hadn't been left in a good mood. The slavers had dragged me back to Whiplash's enclosure in the petting zoo. He was not happy to see me being rejected from a workplace for causing trouble, but the normal punishment and reallocation was held off. I could only guess being at threat from the master had its short-term advantages for my workload. However, Whiplash was not deterred. As though seeking to regain some face, he arranged for me an additional 2 shifts. No matter, I would take whatever they threw at me now. They were too late. Meeting the mare should have made me sad. Any other day I might have curled up and cried my little heart out until I fell into a restless sleep. I might have let the weight of sadness crush me. But not today. I couldn't cry. Okay, maybe I had cried at the moment, but after being thrown in the petting zoo again, I had felt something change within me. A determination I hadn't felt before speaking to her again. Yes, her separation for a second time saddened me, but for her, I would dry my tears and continue on. I crept across the petting zoo. The gang probably wouldn't cause a problem anymore since their encounter with the master. I could see Noose and Lemon resting nearby, waiting for the food run for the day. The pair had been on a night shift among the factories, apparently. I didn't pay them heed. instead watching Whiplash resting just outside his office, the old petting zoo staff room. He wasn't asleep. I didn't think he ever slept, but he was certainly less watchful right now. I used the opportunity to creep around the back of the petting zoo's stables and find a more secluded spot. Nestled between the low-scrap wall and the burned-out stable, I gently pulled my belongings from the saddlebag. My journal parchment drawing, old quill, and of course, the pitbuck. Since hearing Sundial's message, it had taken on a meaning to me. This was no lucky piece of scrap. It belonged to some pony, a pony who had died wearing it when the world ended hundreds of years ago. I couldn't help feeling that it was better in my hooves than some pony who might abuse or harm it. Besides, I couldn't help but feel a certain curiosity to find other messages. I had spent some of last night while sleepless toying with controls to try and find more messages, but all I'd ended up doing was tuning into the Ministry of Morale 24-hour party line.
You gotta share. You gotta care.
Sorry, Sundial, but if I hadn't figured out how to turn that off, I might have smashed your pitbuck in an effort to preserve my sanity. Hearing her damn voice coming from the speakers inside the pink pony statues' mouths was enough. But to have to listen to it on my pitbuck now? Not a chance. I thought I had an idea on how to activate another message. I'd made the first one play again, but time was short. I had more pressing concerns right now than listening to another diary entry. No, I had another message to listen to. I'd heard the announcement yesterday. DJ Pon3 was going to hand out survival tips for a large chunk of today. I'd need everything I could if I were to survive outside. Switching to his station through memory, I turned the dial until I heard the cute voice of Sweetie Belle. It hadn't started yet. I sat it to the side, dialing the volume down to the level of only my hearing before drawing my journal across. Before opening, I had a thought. The mayor had looked at my drawings from about when I had started drawing for myself today. 2 days before, she had looked from when I had been drawing from my subconscious. She hadn't looked at my own drawings from longer back, from when I first got my journal. It was for the best. Before the day of the pit, I did not want to look at my own sketches. I still remembered drawing my own death. I still remembered a few that I'd done just prior to that, since I'd been sent to the fun farm. A few of the slavers, some, more personal pictures of mares, and not much else. But anything before perhaps a month ago, I didn't even remember. It wasn't a small amount either. I'd been drawing my entire life, but the more I had drawn, the more it began to blur together and just become something I did to let out pain or seek solace in. Thus, before me sat a journal in which I didn't even know the contents of more than half of it. Pages filled with mystery, drawings I hadn't remembered doing. Some days I felt tempted to look at them, but not anymore. That part of my life was done. Perhaps one day, when I had escaped, I might look back when I felt safe, but not now. What resided in the earlier pages of my journal would remain a mystery to the blurry past, when I didn't care to remember or really think about anything. I just worked, suffered, and drew pictures of whatever was causing me grief. The here and now was too important to risk the emotional turmoil if I found a picture of an anvil and hammer, or of my mother being dragged away. "Come on, Murky. Keep it together," I muttered, if only to remind myself of my place right now, concentrating on the pages leading further ahead in my journal. Occasionally I stopped to glance at a recent one. I even took a minute to sit and stare at a picture of a mare I'd done just after arriving in Philadelphia. A gorgeous mare with flowing mane and a long bushy tail lying on her side, with the angle posing tailored toward... Perhaps I should move on. Now wasn't the best time to admire my perception of beauty in mares. Picking an empty page, I sat quietly, my mouth tracing shapes idly without any real idea. Part of me wanted to draw the mare. No, not like that. But somehow. I felt that I shouldn't. She asked me to do it once I had escaped. Escape. I knelt down, instead drawing several thick lines in an arch across the page. Smaller wisps of charcoal began curving around the middle. I had no procedure, no patterns to always follow. I simply drew what I felt like and let the eventual picture come to be. Others may have mixed opinions, but to me, they were simply my own little rebellion against the chains on my life. Quality wasn't so important as the process of just drawing. The thick lines became a structure. The curves became some pony. With every shape I drew, I could feel the theme emerging more and more. The structure became long and strong. A wall. The pony became a Pegasus above the wall. Delving deep down into my wishes, the things I wanted for myself. The wall had slavers on it, light wisps of charcoal showing gunshots missing the pony. The Pegasus was flying free, heading for the open wasteland. I sat back smiling. It no longer shocked me or gave me massive rises of emotion. I could draw for myself any time I wanted now. I would fulfill my... A wheezing cough hurtled through my system, causing me to collapse to the side, eyes screwed shut. My stomach ached. The lack of sustenance hadn't been helping. I'd grabbed a quick drink from a rain barrel meant to gather water for primitive purification near the roller coaster just to stay alive, away from dehydration. But I could still feel the brutal effects of no real food for... Oh, goddesses, how long was it now? I couldn't remember. Okay, I'd fulfill my promise to the mare. My picture proved my will to escape for my own life. My cough only reinforced it. To stay was to die. Briefly, I tried not to think that I'd been prepared to throw that life away to end the pain.
Hello out there, Wasteland!
My mind snapped back on track, that hated subject falling immediately as DJ Pon3 came on the airwaves through the pitbuck. This was it.
Now, I bet many of you are wondering, hey Pon3, why are you calling out all these basics to every pony in the wastes? We all know this stuff. Well, my little veterans out there, sure you might. But recently I've been thinking, since about a month and a bit ago, we've had a big rise in ponies going out into the wastes themselves. I swear it's like every settlement and stable from Philly to the Hoof is waking up and finding its own little hero out there to save Equestria in one way or another. Not all these ponies are getting on too well, so I figured, why not revise some of the stuff I've been teaching you all these years? Besides, judging by the news, I figure some of you vets could use a tip or two remembered. Remember, children, the wasteland is the real enemy, and it doesn't like pride or ego.
I had a new page in my journal out. It stung to lose my imagery of escape so suddenly, but this was important. I couldn't read or write a plan. I was going to draw it. Little images to remind myself step by step of what I would need, of my routes and timings, of any handy little tip I could remember from the education to come. I would be a good little student and listen closely.
So, without messing you folks around any further, allow me to cut to the chase. Wastelanders, here's Survival 101 for the Equestrian Wasteland.
So it began. I prepared myself. This was to marathon itself all day. I'd have to listen on and between shifts, collect everything I needed, and be ready. Here we go.
Now, for all those of you who want to fight the good fight, all power to ya. If only more would do that. But, first things first. Know that the world may be dangerous and a hellhound would tear you in half. There is something much more basic. Food. That's right, children. You gotta eat and drink. Store all you can. You cannot rely on the wasteland to provide for you. Last thing any would-be hero wants is to die of hunger. While we're on it, make sure you got everything tied safely to your body where you can reach it quickly. Nothing worse than finding you lost your water can half a mile back in the wastes to a faulty knot, right?
I drew lines. The gang were arguing, or rather, Noose and Lemon were arguing. I didn't know if they really counted as a gang anymore. One way or another, their bickering distracted them from their food. I'd thought about it and simply could not bring myself to take the food from any pony other than them. While I was sure the other ponies would not hesitate to beat me just as bad if they knew my winged secret, this gang I had a particular loathing for.
So what, Noose? You want us to just cower away because some fat pony killed Nails?
That fat pony would tear you in two for smelling the wrong way. Lemon, know when you're beat. We lie low. Our time will come. I was using the wreckage of the old pigsty to creep around behind them. They'd taken to storing the bowls of oatmeal inside it to prevent them from falling away in the wind. Most slaves devoured the oatmeal immediately. Hell, my half portion, thanks Whiplash, had long gone to sate my days-long hunger. Wow, it really said something about slave life that such a meager amount was enough to almost make me feel full. I could only presume they had left the food to, as some slaves claimed, settle, to be less fresh, and become a thicker and more substantial feeling meal instead of the watery goo that we were normally given. I hadn't ever tried it on the few occasions I'd ever been given a meal, but for the sake of supplies, I was willing to try.
Yeah, when both of us are sick. We're being put on the foundry soon and that bastard is back again to shove us around at the workplace.
I leaned forward, my mouth closing around the first wooden bowl, gently pushing a small tin can forward. Please don't make noise. Please don't make noise.
Can't even take out my frustration on the runt either. If he hadn't bucked me in the danglies, I might have felt so. Ah, hell. What am I saying? Bastard Pegasus can get raped to death by the master for all I care.
I tried not to let my imagination take over as I felt my entire body shiver in fear, not just from being nearby to the mare who had almost beaten me to death yesterday, but the sensation of even remembering him. The oatmeal slopped and gurgled in a way that food really shouldn't into the tin can. Taking a second to catch my breath and calm my nerves, I reached for the second, trying not to let the realist side of my mind catch up to what I was doing.
Just shut up.
Lemon, go eat your oatmeal, you stupid buck.
Are you crazy? I'm not touching that stuff till I know it'll stay down this time. Shit tastes even worse coming up.
Okay. You. All the same, I remained thankful for their continued distraction of conversation to not turn around as I poured the second bowl into the tins. Ducking back, I began wrapping them tightly in a wad of cloth with some mouth and hoof work to keep as much of it inside as I could. It wasn't much, but it was all I'd reasonably get that wasn't already being eaten or liable to poison me. It'd have to last till I could scavenge something outside the walls. I began sneaking away, scooting as quickly as I dared along the wall, hiding behind other slaves as best I could. Most were sleeping. Any that did see me wouldn't say a word. No pony particularly liked the gang. As I began to reapproach my hiding place, an unusual sound made me dive for cover. A sound like a screeching saw through rotten wood had startled me. Poking my head out from behind an old pig trough, I glanced in the direction of the horrid noise before sighing in relief. Whiplash had finally fallen asleep, head lolling sideways on the fence from his resting point to drool over the metal. The noise matched his breathing. He was snoring loudly and proudly. I could hardly suppress a small giggle at the sight of such a fearful pony in my life completely left without any poise. If the master had done one good thing, it was make Whiplash seem not so bad anymore. I was about to turn and go back to my hidey hole. DJ Palm3 was going to continue with which towns to avoid soon after Sapphire Shores was done singing. but something clicked in my mind.
Make sure you've got everything tied safely to your body.
I had no real rope or twine, but a long piece of leather might work. Every part of my mind that remained sane was telling me this was a bad idea. All the same, I felt my hooves carry me as stealthily as I could towards Whiplash in his little office. I had just stolen food from the gang. What in the goddess's great eyes was I doing, thinking about stealing from a slave master? I moved one step per snore, fearfully struggling to keep my breathing as regular as I could. I found it was matching Whiplash's snoring patterns out of sheer habit. 10 feet. Whiplash snorted, shifting. I froze on the spot. After a second, he rested. I let my hooves carry me forward. 3 slaves were watching me, rolling their eyes at this stupid runt about to get himself killed. The gang were around the corner of the building, oh so thankfully. I could still hear them arguing about who else they should pick on after I got lifted. 5 feet. The door was right there. Inside I could see a short bed stuffed into the corner, surrounded by old bottles of alcoholic drink. Whiplash had often taken to sneaking shots whenever he thought a griffin hadn't been looking. Stern, the fanatical leader of the Griffins, was legendary for coming down hard on slavers who drank on the job, but the allure of taste, I guess, was too much for many. A schedule was drawn on the wall in Lash's crude handwriting. Or, at least I guessed it was. Either that, or he was into abstract art beyond what I could fathom. Sitting near the door in the tiny room, how did he even fit? There were 4 whips of varying sizes. He even numbered them. The number 1 whip he always carried. Whips 2 through 5 were of ever-changing sizes. I immediately regretted the fact that I could probably recognize them specifically by the feeling of being whipped after only a month in Philly. I went for the number 3 whip, the thinnest and made of strong Brahmin leather. It was the one that left the stinging lines longer than the others, often allowing a slight breakage of the skin and making a sound akin to a gunshot with... Stopping on the spot, I shook my head fiercely. Jeez. My perception of life was really messed up. I realized that I'd have some real explaining to do to any pony outside the wall why I knew so much about whips and chains to avoid them getting weird ideas about my tastes in life. The whip was hard, very hard, but flexible, and if pulled tight, incredibly durable, perfect for the idea I had in mind. I quickly stuck my head in the door and plucked it up into my mouth. Whiplash stopped snoring. I collapsed backwards, trying to run around the hut, but his eyes opened long before I got the command to my frozen joints from the fear.
Murky number 7?
It took him a second to see. His eyes lowered in fury as he snarled and twisted to look at me, the number 1 whip levitating up.
You have precisely 3 seconds to explain why Betsy is in your mouth, Murk.
I gulped, too scared to even drop the whip. Because...
1, 2, and 3.
His whip cracked around my hooves, leading me to stumble backwards, dropping the leather.
Wicked Slit wanted it!
I shouted it at the top of my lungs. Not very much, given all the illness considered.
She wanted to borrow one to do her shift. She wants to, broaden her horizons.
Whiplash didn't look very convinced, but his eyes were still full of sleep, to the point where he waved a hoof.
Whatever. But if it isn't back by tonight, I'm holding you responsible. Shackles be damned. Least maybe it'll stop Slit bitching about slave efficiencies again to me.
He turned, aiming to go back to sleep as I made to run. I could rest up somewhere else before moving on to my shift anyway. But as I turned, breathing a sigh of relief, I heard Whiplash speak up.
Oh, and Murk?
I didn't even dare look around. I wish I had, for the next thing I knew, a burning line of pain whipped its way across my flanks and rump, leaving me to squeal loudly and hop away rather pathetically to fall on my side, rubbing a hoof on one flank. The lash had went right across my cutie mark.
That's for waking me up. Now bugger off to your shift.
I said I wouldn't cry, but I couldn't avoid tears of pain from that blow as I felt it throb and sting. I could hear the other slaves laughing at my lashing across the backside. How I wasn't going to miss this after tonight.
Now, I can't say I enjoy this bit of advice any more than you will. Well, some of you anyways. See, as much as the good old equestrian spirit should run free and solve everything through just talking out your problems, there's a whole lot out there that begs to differ. Gangs, ghouls, and if you're real unlucky, raiders. Hell, there's even worse on top of that. So as much as it pains me to say this, children, if you're going to go out there into the wastes, make sure you go out there packing. Get some weapons and armor, whatever you can. Better to live, folks. Better to live.
Lines became curves. The cart's harness was already giving me a nasty burn on my back where I bore the brunt of the weight when I pulled. Wicked Slit had sent me right to my oh-so-favorite activity in her factory. Cart delivery. Weighing what felt like half a ton per cart, the exhaustion factor didn't so much creep in as slam home. 5 deliveries throughout the day. 1 to each of the ammo mills in Philadelphia, carrying various types of metal for even more varied types of rounds manufactured to feed Red Eye's army. Copper to the iron shod foundry, steel to the saddle sore manufacturing facility. The others I didn't even know the names of. I just put my head down and got on with pulling weights far too large for my somewhat less than stellar levels of strength. It still didn't matter. These were the last 5 carts ever to be pulled by Murky No. 7. I'd see to that. Plus, I had a little plan. Wicked Slit believed me broken in and too cowardly to try anything. It was why she sometimes left me unsupervised or without a handler to better serve her efficiency ratios elsewhere. As such, I'd been able to dump my saddlebag at the side of the factory by the road and use it as a dead drop location. Each trip I made, I had stopped my cart, slipped free of my harness. The builders clearly didn't factor in ponies of my size when they designed it, and shoved a slab of flat metal into it. 5 trips, 5 sheets of differing types of metal. I knew nothing of the composition of metal, so I hoped they would each do the job. I tugged the empty cart into Slit's factory, limp-hoofed and gasping for air in the sweltering air of the machinery and industry. The drop-off zone was heavily guarded by slavers who directed me into a port to store the cart for some poor pony on the next shift. It had become almost a tradition, actually, for them to take bets on how long it took me to back a heavy cart into a bay with my pathetic levels of strength. The current longest time, I believed, was 6 minutes after a day I'd been overloaded. My record was 2 minutes. Rather embarrassing, really, but that is what I'm like after a full shift of pulling those damn carts and having jelly legs by the end of it, or a back sore enough to cause me pain by just turning. I heard, rather than saw, the guards bickering over amounts. It was never much. None of them liked betting more than a few caps or a couple cigarettes on me. Sighing, I once again played their game. In theory, I would just dump the cart, but I had to judge every time which slaver was most likely to beat me up for not having him win, then try to aim for their timing. They hadn't worked out that I could hear their whispering rather clearly. I let my ears do the thinking, hearing a couple bet high, citing my time in the pit and sickness to slow me down. A third voice, a buck, commented on his bet he'd made in advance, as well as the annoyance levels if I didn't do it in under 3 minutes. Well, crap. I tried my best. I really did. But my aching muscles, barely healed injuries, and low energy levels just wouldn't make the cart move at all. With a slip and surprised shout, I fell to the floor while straining to push the cart on its rusty wheels.
Oh, for the love of... Get a move on, you whelp!
30 seconds or you're getting it, Murk! I got a full pack on you!
Get it in less than 30 seconds and I'll get you for it.
My muscles just wouldn't give. I couldn't risk forcing them further. I had to retain enough energy for tonight. What little I'd have left. I sighed, falling over and tilting my head against the cart. Some days you just couldn't win.
Oh, are you kidding me? He's giving up! Come here!
I looked up, breathing deeply and simply hoping to myself that the beating wouldn't be too bad.
Hey! What did I tell you bastards about interrupting slaves?
The trio stopped dead in their tracks. 2 of them even made to leave immediately. The third, who had advanced on me, turned, immediately sweating. Wicked Slit was stomping her way towards us all across the delivery room floor, out of the manufacturing areas. She had old Pegasus flight goggles on to protect from foundry sparks, her knife floating obediently beside her. I felt envious of her stamina to keep magic up like that all day.
You beat them? They work less. Beat them when they aren't in work hours. You think I can afford to lose me 10 minutes of labor every damn time you feel like smacking something? Go hit up a slave in their pen after your shift is done.
Of course. Even slavers had shifts, albeit shorter and less laborious than the slaves. I couldn't imagine Slit would be any happier about losing her slavers than her slaves from their workplace.
Yes, ma'am. Right away, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am.
They scurried away, leaving me to get back on my hooves and, with great effort, shove the creaking cart back into the bay. An 18-inch curved knife on a sadistic slaver mistress has that sort of incentive effect on even weak ponies like me. I collapsed against it, breathing hard as I felt the 5 or 6 miles of pulling take its toll on my stamina. My front right hoof was aching, a dull, pulsating pain making itself known every couple of seconds while every muscle in my torso hurt to move. A familiar pain. I had endured it after every shift under Slit for the past month. I tried to take a few breaths, get to my hooves, but my lungs reminded me that they were yet uncared for by medicine, causing me to hack and cough for a good few seconds. Even as I heard the rough tread of Slit nearing me, clearly the medical potions from yesterday were beginning to lose the temporary effect they had granted me. Judging by the pain in my throat and the swimming of my vision, I figured I had till tomorrow morning before the sickness kicked in again.
Guess it's up to me to unharness you, stupid morons.
Slit was muttering to herself as she reached out with her magic, unlatching the harness from my body. Clearly she hadn't clocked that I could simply slip out myself. Dragging my tired body across the floor with slow, deliberate, and labored movements, I collapsed just beside her. I couldn't help it. The tiredness went to my brain. A night lacking any sleep and only a small portion of foul oatmeal to power me just drained my energy reserves completely. With a snort, Slit roughly knocked me with her front hoof a few times.
Get up, Merc. You've still got 4 minutes of shift time left. Make yourself useful and carry that bag of scrap into the factory before you go. I'll show you where.
Was my well-thought-out and dictated reply.
Shut up, get up, and hurry up!
Her half-buck gave me enough reason to find some strength deep down to dodge the flying hoof and clamber to my own 4 legs to nod quickly. My eyes were hazy. I just wanted to lie down somewhere and sleep. Maybe a massage to my aching muscles. Would a bit of food go amiss? Proper food? With a sigh, I stretched out and trotted over to the sack Slit was motioning to with her knife. Biting the neck of the bag, I didn't even bother throwing it over my back, but rather just began dragging it. Rolling her eyes, Slit merely turned and cantered into the factory.
Celestia, help me from hopeless slaves, she muttered. Or banish them all to the fucking moon where they can't bother me anymore.
I had to bite my tongue. The urge to quip something off at her as a last action before I never saw her again was so strong. Thankfully, I allowed the slave in my mind to take control for a few seconds to remain alive. I followed her, dragging the sack a foot at a time, the heavy leather tasting disgusting in my mouth from old dust and grime across it. Pull. Step back a few feet. Pull. Step back. Inside the factory, the heat hit me like running into a wall. The massive metal vats radiated warmth so strongly that mere proximity was enough to dull the senses and make a prickle on my skin. Metal shards stuck out of the bag, where they had pierced the lining, their scraping sound not helping on top of the massive noise within the factory. My ears ached, almost missing Slit's sudden command to stop before walking right into her rump. With a sigh of relief, I dumped the sack where her knife tapped the ground before kneeling down again. One of the shards fell out. While Slit was glancing at the industrial presses to observe the slaves, I quickly shoved one down my vest. I had an idea for it, courtesy of a radio-born inspiration. "Shift's over, Murk. Get out of here. I hear Whiplash has some more work for you over at the threshing mills. They need a small pony over there. Go straight there." "But—" "No buts, Murk," she spat. "So get yours over to the damned mill before I ensure you can't sit down again for a long time." She removed her goggles, sitting them on the bottom of the stairs that led to her office so she could pull my face up to her eyes. "I don't think I need to explain to you how much I do not like you, Murk." The knife gently seemed to caress my forehead, the tip dragging my lanky mane from my eyes for her to see clearly. "So I'm going to tell you this," she continued, her voice so low I began to worry she knew about my hearing. "I don't want you back. I know that chain-link shackles is coming for you. The Master will not be so forgiving as I have been. He isn't like me, Murk. He won't threaten you. He won't scare you with imagination or promise implausible things." She had my attention, not from the knife that rested between my eyes from above, nor the hard hoof holding my chin up to her face. It was her tone. She spoke almost with reverence, as though she wished she never had to meet him. The Master even made her terrified with his reputation among the slavers. My eyes were wide. "He breaks slaves, Murk. As far as I'm concerned, I'm glad you're going there. Perhaps you'll learn something about why you should have tried harder in life. My little slave, so woefully pathetic. You never tried, Murk. You think I can't see your destiny? Look at that tiny flank of yours. A set of shackles? I sometimes wish I could just close them around your hooves and leave you out to die, because you are so fucking useless to me. Born into slavery, and you still can't hack it." Her hoof roughly shoved me away. I fell on my side, shivering as I pulled my hooves in. "Get out of here. The pit was too good for you." I shakily got up, nodding my head. No, she was wrong. I wasn't going to go to the Master. I was going to escape. I stared at Slit, looking her right in the eyes. I wanted to tell her so she would know by tomorrow that she was wrong. If Slit saw my defiance, she didn't make a sign, instead turning to scream at some slaves for stopping, as they fought for breath from the heat. I wanted to whisper something, to shout something. Just one last word that proved I wasn't going to be beaten by her cruelty anymore. I couldn't think of anything. I never was good with words. She scared the slave in me too much to dare speak out against my masters, so I stole her goggles instead. I took great pleasure in her scream of frustration as I hightailed it from the factory at top speed toward the threshing mills, collecting my saddlebag as I went, to add my new acquirements to it.